Hey everyone, if you love to watch history, hit that subscribe button and watch the video till the end because video is going to be very interesting. Your support keeps this channel going. Why the American Civil War was inevitable. The American Civil War, 1-861-1865, remains one of the most transformative and tragic events in United States history. It resulted in the deaths of over 600,000 Americans and redefined the nation's political and social landscape. While numerous factors contributed to the outbreak of war, the fundamental question of slavery, irreconcilable economic differences, conflicting interpretations of states' rights, and the failure of political compromise made the Civil War inevitable. This essay explores these core issues in depth, demonstrating why the war could not have been avoided. The root cause: slavery. Slavery in the United States was a brutal system of forced labor that existed from the early colonial period until the Civil War, 1865. It primarily involved the enslavement of African people, who were forcibly taken from Africa and sold into slavery. Slavery played a major role in the U.S. economy, especially in the southern states, where enslaved people worked on plantations producing cotton, tobacco, and sugar. Key points about slavery in the U.S. 1. Origins and growth. 1600s, 1700s. The first enslaved Africans arrived in what is now the U.S. in 1619 in Jamestown, Virginia. Over time, slavery became a key part of the economy, particularly in the South. 2. The plantation system. Slavery was most common in southern states like Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. Enslaved people worked in extreme conditions, often suffering abuse, family separation, and no legal rights. 3. Abolitionist movement, 1800s. Many people, including former slaves like Frederick Douglass and activists like Harriet Tubman, fought to end slavery. The Underground Railroad helped enslaved people escape to free states or Canada. 4. Civil War and Emancipation, 1865. Slavery was a major cause of the Civil War between the North Union and the South Confederacy. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring enslaved people in Confederate states free. The 13th Amendment, 1865, officially abolished slavery in the entire U.S. 5. Aftermath and legacy. Even after slavery ended, racial discrimination continued through segregation and racism. The Civil Rights Movement, 1950-60s, worked to gain equal rights for African Americans. Today, slavery's effects are still felt in issues like systemic racism and inequality. Would you like more details on any specific part of this history? Moral and ideological divides. Abolitionist movements in the North grew in strength during the early 19th century. Fueled by moral opposition to slavery. Figures such as Frederick Douglass, William Lloyd Garrison, and Harriet Beecher Stowe played crucial roles in exposing the horrors of slavery to the public. Meanwhile, the South saw these efforts as direct attacks on its way of life and economic interests. The expansion of slavery. One of the most contentious issues was whether slavery would expand into new territories. The Missouri Compromise, 1820, temporarily eased tensions by admitting Missouri as a slave state and Maine as a free state, while prohibiting slavery in the Louisiana Territory north of the 36°G latitude. However, the Compromise of 1850 and the Kansas-Nebraska Act, 1854, reignited the debate, allowing territories to determine for themselves whether to permit slavery. The violent conflict in Bleeding, Kansas, illustrated that the country was on the path to war. Economic differences. The economic differences between the North and South in the U.S. were heavily influenced by slavery and played a major role in shaping the country's history, especially leading up to the Civil War. Economic differences between the North and South. 1. The Southern economy, agriculture and slavery. Based on the South relied on plantation agriculture, with crops like cotton, tobacco, sugar, and rice. Slavery was central to the economy because enslaved labor was cheap and highly profitable for plantation owners. Southern wealth was tied to land and enslaved people, meaning there was little investment in industry or infrastructure. Due to the plantation system, wealth was concentrated in the hands of a small elite, while most white Southerners were small farmers with little economic power. 2. The Northern economy, industry and wage labor. The North had a more diverse economy, including manufacturing, trade, banking, and small-scale farming. Industrialization was growing, with factories producing textiles, tools, and machines. Unlike the South, the North relied on paid labor instead of enslaved workers. Cities were expanding, attracting immigrants and workers who fueled the economy. Railroads and infrastructure were more developed in the North, supporting trade and movement of goods. 3. Economic conflicts leading to the Civil War. The North wanted protective tariffs to help its industries, while the South opposed them because they relied on cheap imports. The South felt economically threatened by the North's push to end slavery, which would destroy its labor system. The North's growing economy made it more powerful politically, creating tensions over issues like taxation, trade policies, and slavery expansion into new territories. 4. Post-slavery economic shifts. After the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, 1865, the Southern economy struggled because it had depended so much on enslaved labor. The North continued to industrialize, becoming the economic powerhouse of the U.S. Sharecropping and tenant farming replaced slavery, but they kept many black and poor white Southerners in poverty. Would you like details on any specific aspect, such as how these differences shaped modern America, states' rights, and constitutional interpretations? The debate over states' rights was another central factor leading to the Civil War. Southern states argued that they had the right to govern themselves, including the decision to maintain slavery without federal interference. Nullification crisis and federal authority. The idea that states could nullify federal laws they disagreed with was tested in the nullification crisis of 1832, when South Carolina attempted to reject federal tariffs. Although President Andrew Jackson suppressed the crisis, it set a precedent for future conflicts over federal versus state authority. The Dred Scott decision. The Supreme Court's 1857 Dred Scott v. Sandford decision ruled that African Americans, whether free or enslaved, could not be U.S. citizens, and that Congress had no authority to ban slavery in the territories. This decision emboldened the South and outraged the North, further deepening sectional tensions. Political failures and the breakdown of compromise. The political system in the United States was designed to prevent conflicts from escalating, but by the mid-19th century, it had failed to resolve the nation's sectional crisis. The collapse of the Whig Party. The demise of the Whig Party in the 1850s highlighted the growing sectional divide. The newly formed Republican Party, founded in 1854, was explicitly anti-slavery and gained support in the North. The South saw the rise of the Republican Party as a direct threat to its way of life. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 was the final breaking point. Although Lincoln had promised not to interfere with slavery where it already existed, his opposition to its expansion was unacceptable to the South. His election prompted the secession of South Carolina, quickly followed by other Southern states. The inevitability of war, given the deep-seated economic, social, and political differences between the North and the South, war became inevitable. By 1861, attempts at compromise had failed, and both sides believed that their way of life was at stake. The South saw secession as its only option, while the North viewed the preservation of the Union as essential. Once Confederate forces attacked Fort Sumter in April 1861, full-scale war was unavoidable. Conclusion: the American Civil War was not simply a result of a single event or a failed compromise. It was the outcome of decades of unresolved conflict over slavery, economic structures, states' rights, and political differences. Despite numerous attempts to prevent war, the fundamental ideological divide between North and South made a peaceful resolution impossible. Thus, the Civil War was not just likely, it was inevitable. History is full of secrets. Unlock them by subscribing. If you enjoyed this video, like the video,